Hi, this is Damien AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist, which can simply be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. And today I'm going to do a talk with my wife, an unusual but a wonderful opportunity. So this is on Atheist Activism Training number 2, Ontology, Epistemology, and Axiology, the methodological use of philosophy. And to give a little tiny bit of background on this, I am in a sense more of a big picture thinker, and before was not as good at details. And in fact, I used to think that details were relatively irrelevant. But it was actually my wife, who is very detailed, that helped me to understand their value. And so it's about asking the right questions in a sense at the right time. So ontology questions are things like, what are you talking about? And epistemology questions, how do you know that? An axiological question is, why do you believe your justification? Or in a sense, why should I or anyone believe it? What is its value? Hammer of truth, i.e. ontology, epistemology, and axiology, together are 3 philosophies that I use methodologically, which means like in a step process that follows a certain order. A hammer of truth that both builds and destroys. It aids in building accuracy towards truth and destroys bad claims that are untrue.
Okay, so I have some questions about this.
Right?
Do I have to learn philosophy first to use the hammer of truth?
Right. So that's an excellent question, because sometimes I've heard people say you have to read a book on logic or something to be able to debate or do things. Not that that wouldn't be beneficial, but for the hammer of truth, we're not in a sense, I'm not trying to have you learn philosophy. I'm having you learn good structure for, in a sense, questions. And so even though we're using philosophy terms, it's more as an educational thing that you can then read up more on if you wanted to, but it's not really required, because really it's about the structuring of good questions.
I say, yeah, I know you learned this from me by watching me. I didn't know exactly what I was doing because I have never taken a philosophy class, and you used to ask me, how do you ask those questions? How do you know what to ask? And by you asking, learning philosophy helped me learn what we were doing. So to me, it's very important to use the hammer of truth. And I think you have done a really great job of learning what I did, and we worked together on this. So I just want to say, yes, you do not need to know philosophy to use this. I do not know it, and I use it all the time. And I've been using it since as a young kid. And I just thank Damien to learn philosophy to show me what I was doing. Thank you, Damien.
Yes. So, and I would agree that definitely I wasn't good at asking questions. So the fact that I'm good now is definitely a lot to do with, my wife teaching me. Shayna showed me, and also a lot of times she would just demonstrate it. So it's not like she directly taught me every time. But she would ask questions, and I would think, why didn't I think of that? And so it really helped me to challenge, because like I said, being someone who's more big picture, I was looking at the bigger ideas and wasn't paying attention to the details, which I now see is an error way of thinking. Because once you have a lot of details, it helps, even if you had a big picture, to understand it better, to get its qualities and its more richness, which allows you to be more sure and accurate. So its value is, in that way, is very important.
Okay, do we have to remember the terms in order to use this style?
No, you don't have to remember the terms per se, like their full meanings, but it helps if you understand, because it's a little bit, because it's about the structure. It's about knowing what to do when. Because even though it's ontology, epistemology, axiology, it's not like you always get to do all 3. So it's important to understand which kind of questions need to happen when. Because sometimes you'll ask for an ontology, you'll ask for what they're talking about, they'll say something, but they'll give something else that you don't know what they're talking about. Then you don't get to move on to the other things. You got to then start back at ontology again. What are you talking about? In other words, some people say, I believe in God. And you say, what's a God? And they'll say, well, it's a spirit. Well, I don't know what a spirit is, so what's a spirit? So it's that kind of you have to go back. So it's good to know what these terms, in a sense, are identifying.
So you're saying, I was going to ask, and you're kind of already going in there, so I was going to ask, do we have to use these terms in the order you said, and if so, why? So you kind of already hit on that a little bit, that you should go in this order, but sometimes you might have to keep going back to the first one, ontology, or
correct,
based on how they answer your question.
Correct. It is important to try to go in the order of understanding what something is, and then how they are claiming to know what this something is, and then the axiology, judging, in a sense, the accuracy of what they're offering and the quality of the information they're offering to relate to the what they're claiming it is or what it is. And so, yeah, it is important, and it's not like it. Like I said, it's not like you always get to go to the end to judge what they've offered. Sometimes you got to keep going to the beginning again, to the ontology, or keep asking how they know that. So ontology is the thingness of things. Questions, in a sense, to define or compare and contrast thingness.
Okay, so what is the thingness of things? I'm not sure what I'm understanding what you mean by that.
So thingness of things is like addressing its actual essence, its actual qualities, its actual attributes. So like if you give somebody a definition, let's say out of a dictionary, that's like, in a sense, a little cliff note to the idea of what you're talking about. It's not the full richness of the thing itself, always. So if I say, in other words, a dictionary requires you, in a sense, to know other things. So if a dictionary says, there's a whale is a mammal, well, you'd have to then know what a mammal is. If it says that if it lives in the ocean, you'd have to know what an ocean is. Not that people, in a sense, don't, but it's assuming. So ontology really is getting to what is being assumed. Instead of doing the assuming, instead of when someone says a term, us assuming that we already know, especially in terms that are kind of ambiguous, like a god. I'll literally ask 10 different people what a god is and have, in a sense, 10 different answers. So, but often, people in debate are assuming that they know what that term even is being used by the other person.
So really, the first thing about ontology is you never, ever assume that you know what that person's thinking, feeling, or what their definition is, because you are not born knowing. So that's the first thing of the question. That's why the ontology is very important. You have to know exactly what they're talking about. And that's why Damien, every time he says, asking these people, what is a God? And they keep coming up with stuff that is not even justified or explaining. And so you got to keep coming back, because you cannot assume that you know what a God is. And so it's very important. Just never, ever assume anything. Keep asking your questions till you get them down to exactly what the ontology is, so that everybody knows how to speak on that conversation or on that subject.
Right, and it has, in a sense, two other reasons why this is important, for the reason why you should do it this way. It's not just so that you can understand what they're saying, but also so that you don't straw man them. You don't, in a sense, attack something that they don't believe. If you spend an hour attacking, what a Catholic believes, and you're talking to a Hindu, you can see where that wouldn't be very valuable. And so, or if you're talking to someone who's New Age and sees God as some kind of good, orderly direction, and you're attacking, a being who is said to have created the universe, you might be talking past each other. And so it's not very, in a sense, beneficial for a good, thoughtful discussion.
So that's why this is where you say to start with ontology first.
That's why you should start with ontology first. And the other thing you have to understand is that when someone offers an ontology that they agree to, that you haven't assumed, but that they agree to, then they've given you, in a sense, the ability to then use that as a standard to hold them accountable to. If you don't establish an accountable standard with what they believe, then you can't, in a sense, aid them in seeing why that needs to be justified, or that needs to, in a sense, have a burden of proof. If you never get what the thing is, then you've allowed them, in a sense, the opportunity to shrug off the burden of proof, in a sense.
Okay, so what is ontology relating to in a non-philosophy explanation?
It's like I said, a philosophy explanation is a thingness of things, in a sense. It's its being, it's becoming, it's reality. So, in a sense, just think of ontology as the reality of what something is. Whatever you claim something, what is it really? Not in a sense opinion, but what is it? What is it? This quality? It's thingness, its beingness, its essence, its substance. What is this thing? If I say that I have a chair, it can't be a table. Even though you can sit on a table is not a chair. A chair is an idea that relates to a certain type of thing, as in a sense a certain ontology.
And it's in this reality.
Right. Well, even if you're explaining to something that was not in this reality, like we'll say, so fantasy character, I can't be talking about Superman, but be actually, explaining Spider-Man or something. So, in a sense, the ontology of a Superman. Generally, when we're talking ontology, though, we're talking to reality things. But even if you were talking in a sense, non-reality things, they, in a sense, still have a ontology, container, in a sense that the attributes are held in. You can't explain one thing but be talking about something else. You can't, explain a cat but then pointing to a dog. And so epistemology, once they have offered this definition, or explanation or quality of the substance they're talking about, the ontology, so then what you basically want to know is the epistemology. How do they know this? So epistemology is, in a sense, the knowledge of things. It's a justification.
Okay, so what do you mean by the knowledge of things then?
Well, it's questions to explore and establish and to confirm knowledge. So when people say things like they say, I believe this, they're making, in a sense, a truth claim. So it's important to understand the ontology. Is it their personal belief, or is it their belief this is reality? That sometimes is important, because some people will say, I believe something, but they just believe it as their opinion. And so that's why ontology is important. And once they say, no, this is reality, God is real, that is a truth claim, that is a knowledge claim. They're claiming, I have knowledge that this thing is real. And so once they do that, that's when, in a sense, you want to investigate their claimed justification. How is it they claim to know this?
Okay, what is epistemology relating to in a non-philosophy explanation?
Well, we do in a sense epistemology all the time when we're in discussions and we're trying to understand how something is warranted or justified or explained or often offered as said, something being true, something being knowledge. When you say something is true and you want to know how someone is claiming that is epistemology. It's the understanding of why is it justified, why is it accurate. These are epistemology things. It's trying to figure this out.
So it's kind of like evidence or facts, or
right? Yeah, it's
why this is true.
Right. Why is this true? Why is what you're saying true? When you're asking that kind of exploratory understanding, that is epistemology. You're dealing with why people are claiming to know this, and then how could they claim to know this?
So then why do you say to use epistemology after ontology but before axiology?
Well, ontology should be first, and because you need to know what they're talking about. Epistemology is important to come next, because then the next question should be, after they've told you what they're talking about, is how do you know that? How do you claim this? How is what you're stating justified? You're asking them to give account of their burden of proof of how they're saying this. And the reason why it's important to do that before axiology is because axiology is then going to judge what they offer as their epistemological justification. So that leads us to axiology. And axiology is, in a sense, worth, value, goodness of things, accuracy. So it's questions that valueize or value judge to establish and confirm value or disvalue, worth or disworth, as well as goodness, as well as what is, in a sense, ungood or not good.
Okay, so what do you mean by the value, worth, goodness of things?
So a value of things in an axiological sense is that it revolves around anything that is, in a sense, qualitative, anything that you're assessing. So if you assess something, you're attaching its value or you're understanding its value. So the difference between, in a sense, non-evidence and evidence is that one has a value that attaches to some sort of an accuracy of what is being, in a sense, talked about. That's its value. So truth has a value. So when you say things like facts, truth, worth, these are all, in a sense, value judgments that you're claiming to establish, attached to how these things are in relation to reality, facts, to what is being stated.
So to me, this is what axiology, I think. Axiology is the way we determine or base our judgments or decisions on what is the value, truth, worth, facts, quality, evidence, or how much I or others value it or how much value it contains.
Excellent. Right. So I always think of things as presumptive value. Right. So presumptive value can be a success or presumptive value failure in axiology. That people presume or they state that things have value. And so a presumptive value success is that you can actually justify that it is accurate, that something has the value that you claim it has. If I say that I have a fact, but I can't produce anything to support and justify or the warrant of me saying this, then I have failed in doing so. In axiological presumptive value success, I can actually establish in some credible way, with some kind of an accuracy or relatableness to reality, that it is the case, that it is so, or that it is likely so.
Okay, so what is axiology relating to in a non-philosophy explanation?
Well, in a sense, we do axiology all the time. We constantly make value judgments. Whenever something is offered to us, when people say, well, this is a fact, we're trying to assess its axiological value. When we say this, I see this as true, we've done is we've valueized that it is accurate to a certain, statement, claim, or piece of evidence. So we're constantly using it all the time. We value judge, and valueize everything. Everything, in a sense, has a value, connection to it.
Okay, so what do you mean disvalue, disworth, or ungood?
So disvalue is like things that actually it's lack value or remove value. So certain things can. So harmful behaviors in a pro-social experiment or experience or situation, things that are, in a sense, antisocial are disvalue. Where in a sense ethics involves, in a sense, pro-social behavior. And antisocial, in a sense, can be seen in that light as, in a sense, an unethical or a disvalue behavior. Where pro-social, when it comes to ethics, is in a sense, confirms a value behavior. And disworth or worth. So things have worth. And disworth, in a sense, is the removal of that. It is things that actually, like, let's just say that I say that I have, a glass of milk. Well, if I pour motor oil and I've just disworth that milk, it's now contaminated and it does not have its original worth to it. And ungood. It goes back to the quality of things, in a sense. That behavior can be goodness. Things can be good. In other words, like, it's a form of goodness for our ecological environment to have ecological sensitivity towards how we should environmentally interact and be, in a sense, good stewards of the earth, and pollution, and allowing things that harm our environment and cause global warming and kill off us and animals, or make it areas inhabitable, would be ungood.
Okay. And why do you say to use axiology last in the hammer of truth?
Right. Axiology to me should be applied last, because you first need to know to make an axiological judgment. You can't assume. So you have to have an ontology, because you have to know what they're talking about. If I said, I want you to value judge something because of its some substance, but you need to know, well, what substance? What is this something you're talking about? And if I said, and I know this something is good because I was told, well, that's not the best way to, told by who? And what did they tell you? I mean, axiology needs a bunch of information.
It needs all those good details.
It needs all those good details, because that's how it's going to make an accurate presumptive value success. Then it knows, okay, this is why this is this. Something is. So in other words, like, if I was gonna let someone use a car, and the car only costs $300, how are you going to behave in that car is going to be totally different than if that car were to cost $300,000. Because of its value change, it changes how you would, in a sense, behave. So the assessing and getting the accuracy of value is important. But it can only happen if you understand what's involved. If you don't know what's involved, you can't make axiological judgments. All you have to say is, you don't know. Which it would be accurate if you don't know. Because you cannot, in a sense, assume and get to accurate axiology.
So once again, you come back to my main goal of everything. You never, ever assume. You have to know exactly what the ontology is, what we are exactly talking about. Because if you don't start with that, the whole conversation, everything is not
correct.
It's not correct. You can't determine its value, its worth, or the evidence. So you have to know exactly. So you should never assume.
Right, and that's why I know there's some people that focus really, really heavy on epistemology, and not that epistemology can't, in a sense, relate to this and other things, but I think that it doesn't emphasize the direct and needed importance of a good ontology. And then I think because of just focus on epistemology, you're losing that ability to understand how to properly value judge things like axiology does. So I think that it absolutely is important, not to assume, and not to assume at any level, not to assume what they're talking about, not to assume what they're talking about, how they know that. Like someone says they're a Christian, they say they believe in God. Don't assume that it has to do with the Bible. Maybe they don't use the Bible. There's a lot of Christians that never, read the Bible, or the Bible they read could be the Jehovah's Witness Bible, could be the Catholic Bible, which has more books, than a Protestant Bible. So you can't assume. And then how they read it, how they were taught, which one they're using. There's 140 something versions in English of the Christian Bible. So, once again, we can't assume just because someone says something that we just jump on it. We need to slow down and not assume, and try to ask, what are you talking about? How do you know that? And then what is the worth or value of what they're offering?
And also we have to remember, we are not born knowing. So that's a big deal.
Yes.
We're not born knowing, so you should never assume. And plus, you don't know what that person's thinking or feeling or their experience. So that's why you always have to start with ontology. Never assume. We're not born knowing. We don't know everything. So you have to ask good questions. And that's where you get to ontology.
I agree. Then it gets back to the hammer of truth, which is my name for a folk, in a sense, methodological use of philosophy, the ontology, the epistemology, and the axiology questions to remove errors and to add accuracy. But like I said, the inspiration for this did not come from philosophy. The inspiration for this hammer of truth really came from my wife Shana, and her helping me to understand the real axiological value of things, especially details and asking good questions. And we are credible thinkers, and if we are, we should adopt rationality, assumptions as necessary constraints on interpretation, as well as practical issues addressing methodological problems faced by, in a sense, gatherers, which is ontology, inquisitors, which is epistemology, and judgers, which is axiology. Taking down God assertions 1, 2, 3. 1. What is a God? An axiological question. How can one claim to know anything about a God?
Well, no, what is a God is an ontology question.
I thought I said that.
You said axiology.
Oh.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we got it.
Okay, well, I'll say it again. What is a God? An ontology question. How can one claim to know anything about a God? An epistemological question. Why is there value, validity, goodness, or worthiness in a claim that one knows anything about a God? An axiological question.
Okay, so I want to go back to what is a God. So what good is the question of what is a God, and what is the purpose of such a question?
So what good question of what is a God is because a lot of people use the term God in a lot of different ways. And so it's really important. I know a lot of atheists just jump already assuming what God is false. Yeah, but we need to figure out what they're claiming as God, because then we can debunk or help them see the error in what they're claiming. So it's very important to know what is a God.
So like when some people think what is a God, they think of this as some kind of force out there. Some people think the God is some kind of spirit out there. Some people think God is like a really being, but that's not. So that's like in every religion or whatever, everybody has a different ontology of what a God is, correct?
That is correct. And some people, or I should say not some, a lot of people just kind of make up their own ontology of God or whatever that they're in their mind without really attaching it directly to a book, a religion, a thing. And so it makes it even more important to ask the ontology question of what is a God. And it's also important too because to me we offer them maybe for the first time in their life a chance to really understand that they don't know. We can sit here all day long and say, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know. But it's the quality that happens when they themselves realize, yeah, I can't answer. I've had philosophers tell me, and no one can answer this question. And I go, exactly. So they should stop saying they know.
Okay, so what is meant by asking people how they claim to know a God, and what is the purpose of such a question?
Well, the reason why it's important to claim how they know a God is, once again, we often assume that it's a specific way. We may think, oh, well, they got it because of religion, but maybe they didn't. We think that they got it because of Holy Book, but maybe they didn't. And so it's real important, once again, we need to stop assuming and start asking. It's also important because then we can find out what their justification is. That way we don't end up strawmanning them and attacking some argument that they don't hold. And also it holds them accountable to then later they can't say I don't hold that if they've just clarified what they do hold.
And then so what I just asked you, that's the epistemology question.
That's epistemology question.
So first we ask them what is a God, it's our ontology. They give us their definition.
Correct.
And then based on their definition, we ask them what is the epistemology question.
In other words, their justification.
Okay.
So they're giving us, in a sense, sort of like their definition of a God. The next one, they're giving us the justification of that definition. And then we're, in a sense, it's assessing with them, is this really valid? Is this reliable? Is this truth? Does it have goodness, worth?
So this is where when you say what is meant by asking people the value, the validity, the goodness, the worthiness, and a claim to know what a God is, and what is so what is such purpose? What is the purpose of such questions to determine the value or the
right is to accurately as possible value judge what is being offered as their justification or what is being offered as their definition. in a sense, of the God. So the axiology is dealing with not the assumptions, but what is offered as an epistemology, what is offered as the ontology. So the axiology has to come last because it has to assess the two other things. It has to assess the epistemology and the axiology that are being offered, which is in a sense the claim and then the claim's justification. That is what axiology is attacking or addressing, is in a sense, or challenging, or is investigating to make its judgment. The axiology is the judgment of those other things. Have they really offered a reliable and a reasonable or a reality-based, claim of how they justify their gnosis? If they say, well, things came out of the air and just, dripped into my mind. We need to assess, is that possible? This has happened to you often.
Like, what came out of the air? What is that? There's my ontology because of what came out of the air. I don't know what came out of the air. Correct?
Right. Just like one time someone told me, I know that God is real because I have talked to angels from heaven, and I said, how did that happen? What are you talking about? You talked to angels. Well, I took magic mushrooms, and that allowed me to talk to angels, and then because of that, I knew heaven was real. And so, to me, the first question is, well, what do you mean by angel? Because, well, it was this, supernatural being. I said, okay, so was it a voice? So I'm asking questions to clarify what ontology they're really talking about. Because, well, yeah, it was a voice. So it was or was not a being that you saw visually. No, I didn't see it, I just heard it. See, and I've already helped understand what the ontology that was being offered. Before I just the term angel, now I'm hearing that it's not something the person saw, because I'm asking further ontology clarifying questions of what they're offering before I judge how they know this. Which in a sense also could be touching a little on how they know this, because he offered that he heard it. So he's offering the way that in a sense he claims to know this. So he says he heard this, so he didn't see it. So I said, so it could have been not angels. Did they say the thing that you heard? Did it say that it was an angel? Well, no. So again, I go back to the ontology and I'm clarifying what is being offered. And then I said, when you heard it, did you hear it in a loud voice and in a quiet voice? Was it in a male voice? Was it in a gender neutral voice? Was it a female voice? Was it a voice of an adult? Was it a voice of a child? I started asking questions like this, type of questions. And then he said, well, I guess I didn't really hear it. I guess it was more like in my mind. Oh, so now we're offered a more accurate ontology. Doesn't know it's an angel. Doesn't see it. Doesn't even actually hear it, even though it stated first that he heard it. Now he's just saying it's in his mind. And I said, well, how were you able to understand this? Going back to the sense of epistemology, how did you know that it wasn't just your mind? And how did you know that it was something outside in your mind? What if it was just you hallucinating? I said, could this happen, do you think, if you were on LSD? Or do you only think that magic mushrooms do it? Yes, only magic mushrooms because they're natural. So, but the whole point is getting them to understand. I helped him to see that what he was offering wasn't reasonable, and that it wasn't even accurate to what he had said that it was. And so I helped him understand that because he didn't see it, he didn't know it was an angel, he never said that. He doesn't even know that it was from external. It could have been just in his mind, and there could have been, in a sense, no justifiable difference to claim that this was something different. That he got to understand that he doesn't really know. And that is, in a sense, a wonderful place. To me, it's not that every person that we challenge with the hammer of truth are going to go, aha, I was totally wrong and I need to totally rethink everything I think. But we allow them to start for the first time with their own mouth, realize, I don't know. Because most people, when you talk about they have faith, they say, I know 100%, or I'm totally sure, I'm completely sure. And then when you help them with this method, they start to say, well, maybe I'm not totally sure.
Good.
So let me just go a little quick on ontology. Is in a sense being. This is a philosophy explanations. Is in a sense being that which is.
And that's what the Greek meaning ontos means, right?
Right. And then the meaning, in a sense, logos for Greek is discourse, study, in a sense, reason for things. So ontology is the philosophic study of the nature of being, becoming, existence, or reality, as well as the basic categories of beingness and their relations.
Okay, so what does beingness have to do with the God something question?
So what beingness has to do with the God something question is God is offered generally as a being, as a thing that has a substance. Because they'll say often, like the standard version I would say, is that God is all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful, right? So those are all attributes for a thing that could possess them. And so that's why we need to not just listen to those things, but what is doing that behavior of being all-knowing? Something has to be the thing that has this all-knowing capacity. Something has to be, in a sense, this thing that is doing this all-good behavior.
So once again, this is like not assuming things, but asking first.
Right. And so going back to the ontology question, what are you talking about? And then epistemology is, in a sense, its Greek meaning is, in a sense, knowledge and understanding. And then the logos part, which is discourse, study, and reason. And it is, in a sense, the theory of knowledge, especially with regards to its methods, its validity, and its scope. And epistemology is, in a sense, the investigation of distinguishing justified true belief from opinions.
So what does justified belief mean when people think different?
Right. So people do think different, but in a sense, we're all limited, in a sense, by a certain kind of reality, and or like logic. Logic, there's no such thing as a circle that's a square. So there are, even though people can think different around, in a sense, how they use different things, there's certain limitations. Now, people could say, I don't agree. I think there can be, illogical things. But that's something you would need to find out with ontology and then figure out what exactly they mean by that. And if that's what they mean, then how do they claim to take anything as true? Because if they're saying that they have no limitations, then how possibly do they believe that? And how possibly do they believe that anyone else will believe that? Because I think that it's too easy to get irritated by things that are illogical instead of helping people see why things need to have a justification, like epistemology, and they need to have a certain type of method to how they're doing things, and a scope and how they're figured out.
So that's where what does inquiring about methods, validity, and scope mean in a relation to the God something question? That's where you need those, right?
Right, that's where you need those. You need to understand how is it that they're figuring out that what they're offering is valid. How? Or are they just denying validity totally? That's still important to know, because then they certainly can't say that something is accurate or true if they can't justify its validity. And if they can't justify what method that they use, like let's say that someone says, well, I see truth is different than you. Okay, I always say, then I want to ask the ontology question, though, that's relating to this, is what method are you using? And how did you decide that method is accurate? Because they're, in a sense, that if they're saying something, that epistemologically they're using a method. And then if we don't understand the method, or they're offering something that's bizarre, instead of just saying it's bizarre and stupid or not logical, it's better to find out, okay, if you say that method works, show me that method. Like say that I use faith. Okay, so you're offering your epistemology, the way you know things, where you justify true beliefs from opinion, is faith. Tell me how that method works. Tell me how often you use that method. Is that method so effective that you use it in every area of your life? If you do, what would that mean? How would someone else know? And is it limited just to what your faith is? In other words, like, is it personal to you? So someone else could have faith in your religion. Would it be the exact same? And if faith is a valid method, why is it not accurate or valid for other religions?
Well, I have a question on the faith then, because faith really means there's no evidence. It's based on non-evidence, correct?
Well, yeah, I would agree. The faith is being offered in the place of evidence.
Which doesn't have any evidence.
It isn't evidence. I agree. Faith is feelings.
Yes.
So faith is feelings. Faith is opinion. So epistemology wants to know true in a sense, justify beliefs from opinion. Faith is the opinion. The problem is they're offering faith as their way of knowing things, as their epistemology. They're saying that it's valid because I believe God because I have faith. They're saying I'm valid because I have faith. And they're saying that in a sense their method to discern truth from non-truth is through faith.
Which is just their feelings.
Which is their opinion.
Facts and opinions, and that's not facts.
And epistemology does not care about opinions in a sense. It wants to know what's a justified belief, not an opinion belief.
Okay. So once again, that's just the epistemologist. How do you know that?
Correct. How do you know that? And so then axiology, which starts with axia, which is a value and worth. And then logos, meaning discourse, study, reason. It is the philosophical study of value, as well as ethics and aesthetics. Formal axiology is a specific branch of the science of axiology. Axiology also studies goodness, value, or worth in its widest sense of these terms. Its significance lies in the unification, in the sense that it provides for the study of varied questions, economic, moral, aesthetics, and even logical, that had once been considered to be in relative isolation until axiology. An axiology question is, why do you believe your justification? Or in a sense, why should I or anyone? So the hammer of truth, again, is ontology, epistemology, and axiology. And what is a God? An ontological question. If you think you believe in a God, what do you mean by God? Saying a name tells me not one thing about the thing I am asking to know. Its beingness, thingness, attributes, qualities. Thus, the thing God to which you are talking about, I want to hear an explanation of its beingness, thingness, attributes, and qualities. Religious or theistic people with supernatural beliefs often seem as though they haven't thought much about this, and it is we who can, in a sense, using ontology questions, can help them to understand, in a sense, what is it about this beingness, thingness, attributes, qualities they are trying to refer to. What do you mean by God when you use the term God? And I am not asking you for a name that you attach to a thing that you label God. I don't need to know what the God you believe you know is, in the sense known by. I am asking, what is the thing you are naming as a God, as if they are real? Are you just making stuff up? Or, in a sense, guessing, hoping, or just promoting unjustified ideas? You want to believe. What is a God? Do you want to know what's true, or want what you believe without concern to what may actually be true? And then the epistemology. How do you claim to know about a God? An epistemological question. How can you claim to know about a God? Guessing is not evidence. Neither is wild, unfounded assertions that are written in that are not written in a sense in reality, that are devoid in a sense of put in places like documented in holy books. Atheists do not have to prove gods do not exist, as gods have never been proven to exist. You do. And how can you claim to know that this is? Claiming to know something is to assert that you have understanding, awareness, or a familiarity. You have that for your claim to knowing a God. How do you claim to know a God? Such as, what are your valid and reliable pieces of evidence, facts, information, in a sense, descriptions to justify that you have a true belief? As in, how did you gather or generate this proposed knowledge about what is a God? How was your claim to know about God asserted, acquired, possessed, and established?
Once again, where's your evidence, your truth in this reality? Not based on faith, because that is not evidence.
Right. Because faith is feelings.
That's all it is, feelings. It's not anything you can acquire, possess, or establish.
And it's not anything in a sense you can assess its accuracy. Feelings don't have accuracy. If you're not going to relate something to the regular world, to where that we can assess and can know outside of your mind, then you've offered nothing of value. So, why do you believe your justifications to know a God? An axiological type of question. Why should we believe your claim to know a God from your proposed evidence? Does it have facts indicating why it is true? Why it is valid, reliable, or accurate? Why do you believe your claimed justification sources? Do they fulfill your burden of proof obligation to provide sufficient warrant for your claim to know a God? Why do you suggest that there is quality in your claimed evidence? Why is your offered evidence of knowing a God by your claimed method the kind which is justified and or reasonable, one which can produce valid and reliable, accurate proof? Why is the criteria sound? Some sort of representation of the outside world, ways that are directly accessible, unlike a book on its own. Some sort of representation of the outside world, ways that are indirectly accessible, unlike a book. Second hand, lacking some sort of representation of the outside world, neither directly or indirectly attainable nor demonstratable, like a book on its own. To me, truth is a value judgment that we place as a label on what we believe is evidence. Thus, we should be compelled to validate the warrant to believe this value judgment we label as truth is actually supported with valid and reliable reason and evidence. There simply and rightly must be an intellectual ethics of belief responsibility or burden of proof to justify the believed truth that is claimed to others is actually demonstrably as being truth with valid and reliable reason and evidence when it is stated as such. Yes, intellectually, one should provide a justificationism for their assertions that map the sort of governing good habits of belief formation, belief maintenance, and belief relinquishment. Ontology. What are you talking about? Please slow down and give each specific detail individually. Epistemology. How do you know that, and why do you think it is justified or warranted? Axiology. Why is its value, if any, and why do you value that, or why would anyone? If you don't know already, dialectic is the art of investigating or discussing the truth of opinions. Questions in order to find truth by giving people 3 questions that can put towards almost anything is what, in a sense, the hammer of truth is trying to do. And it helps remove error and thus improves accuracy. Mock debate court, in a sense, using the hammer of truth. Ontology is reality questions or assertions. Witness gives evidence about a claim. Epistemology, truth questions, assertions. Lawyer searches for warrant or justification for the claim. Axiology, goodness for, questions, assertions. Judge, jury assesses the value judges because of the qualities in or lacking in a claim. Always try to follow this attack order. Ontology, understanding the thingness of things, like what can or cannot be real, like not a God. Epistemology, understanding what you know or can know, as in, you don't have the thing in this reality to know anything about this term called God, and no way of knowing if there is anything non-natural beyond this universe, and no way to state anything about it, even if there were. Axiology, understanding what is good or valuable, as well as what is, in a sense, harmful or evil or unvaluable. Like how the stories about theistic gods are often racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, intersexphobic, xenophobic, etc. Thus, they are directly against an honored humanity, and thus themselves evil or unvaluable. Unvaluable, as in the God concept you have is, in a sense, projected as a harmful thing with harmful attributes, demonstratively harmful in the holy book stories like flooding the whole earth, and thus is and condemning people to hell, especially just for not believing, and thus is highly unvaluable to humanity.
So I want to go back to like where you just started. You said those 3 things so about ontology. So like with ontology, like you would say, what is your claim? What aspects must be there for your claim? What makes your claim different than others and similar claims? And then epistemology is how do you know your claim? How reliable or valid must your aspects be for your claim? And how does the source of your claim make it different than other similar claims? And then axiology, it should be some of the questions. Why are your objects of proposed value subjective psychological states or objective psychological external world state for your claim? Why do you propose descriptive words fit qualities or valuations such as your as powerful, knowing, and present in the infinite world, or all powerful, all knowing, and all present God assertion their claim? And what is the value for, worth for, and or goodness for claims different than other similar claims?
Exactly. Take, for instance, how religious supporters try to, and is used in a sense, evaluation tactics for saying there are peaceful religions if we bring up the fact that there are harmful ones. I may respond, what do you mean by religion? And what do you mean by peaceful or good? Asking to find out the truth or, as usual, expose a lack of a good ontology. Then I may respond, how do you know what is your sources and how reliable are they? Asking to find out the truth or, as usual, expose a lack of a good epistemology. Then I may respond, what value do you think that what you are saying has, and to what level of proof do you feel truth needs, as well as how do you ensure its accuracy, asking to find out the truth, or as usual, expose a lack of a good axiology. So, I think that this is a good place to end the video. It was just to give a good idea of the hammer of truth, the ontology, the epistemology, and the axiology. And I really appreciate my lovely wife for helping me with this, not only in this video, but coming up with these ideas to begin with, and to learn to ask good questions, which I'm now much better at.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to be on here, and I really appreciate you showing and telling people that this concept that is really helpful. It's helped you. It can help anybody in any conversation. You use this all the time. It'll make the conversation, the debate, or discussion really be a truthful and honest intellectual discussion. So I really appreciate it, Damien, and thank you.